Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the GTM Pack podcast. I am super excited to be joined by two friends who, David, I know we've been connected for years, just I think through the HubSpot crew and Mark Roberge and those folks. And I know we reconnected last year or so, and it's been great to reconnect and talk shop. I know we're gonna dig in pretty deep today into product-led sales and really what it means, I think, for the most organizations out there. Fred, we connected, I think 2 years ago. You were running your startup, and you have since joined the Calixa team, and you're heading up content. So really excited to be talking to you both. David, real quick, could you just give us kind of a couple second background on kind of your career and what brought you into the whole PLS world?
Yeah, so a little bit windy. I started as the first person selling HubSpot CRM back in 2014, and that was kind of like early versions of what would be PLS or even PLG. Those acronyms didn't exist back then. And then I moved to product at HubSpot and launched Service Hub, and then I launched our Operations Hub product line. And now I am back in the sales org, leading a team of sales specialists. So my team sells the products that I just spent the last 5 years launching. And I don't know, I just think PLS is the future, like product led is the future. And I think I wouldn't say a lack of practitioners in the space, but I think there's a lack of truth. And so part of the reason I'm passionate about it is just sharing my learnings personally, not saying you should do this or you should do that, but here's what happened when I've seen it a bunch of different times, so that people don't have to make those mistakes. They can make new ones.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Fred, why don't you do the same real quick? And you're living the vendor solution side of helping enable these motions.
Yeah, and I so completely agree with David. There's a lot of opinions and noise in the space, and very few tactical examples. So 90% of my day is just talking with folks like David and understanding how do you do things, and try to keep my opinions aside and understand how to best do it. So it's really cool to be in that position. But my background quickly, I started a company out of college, still had 2 semesters to go. It was in the relationship intelligence space. We pivoted a few times, ended up in the product-led sales space because that's a passion of mine. I agree with David that it's the future. We were a little bit late to this space. I needed to learn a lot. We made a lot of mistakes, so we decided to wind it down. And then I joined Calixa as the head of content to lead the content strategy and execution. Yeah.
Awesome. And I just got to say, as a serial founder myself, even if you've done it multiple times, you still make mistakes. You still, are constantly learning. I know a couple individuals who got, I guess we use wealth and success as a proxy for success, right? I should say. And so he's got, this individual that I'm thinking about has a couple million, $100 million, I should say, in the bank, and still have had multiple failures after a massive win. So just something to keep in mind. The reason why I reached out to both of you when I saw that post on the Sherpa, I was like, holy shit, like I love that. I really want to dig into that. Real quick, David, why don't you kind of just give us a quick overview before we dive into some more like specific or tactical points on like what inspired you to, kind of come up with this analogy, and what is the Sherpa?
Yeah, I don't know what inspired me to come up with it. I remember in like early 2015, like drawing it on a napkin. Fred, shout out to you for making it actually look a lot better than my original, yeah, my
Nice.
original depictions. But I was sitting there in seat as an individual contributor, as a product led salesperson. And again, no one was talking about it like this. And I was like, this feels a lot different than all of my other sales roles. And I was really successful in what I was doing. And I kind of broke down like why. And I think the reason why is because I was treating the prospects or users in my case as much as an interaction that was much further down the funnel than I would have at a normal sales job where I was going through this really deep discovery and asking them a million questions so I could fill out my CRM and we knew all the information about them. And I was like, you know what this kind of feels like? And I think I had at the time had like watched a documentary about Everest, and I was like, this kind of feels like a Sherpa, right? Like it's marketing and growth and brand and community's job to get users or the people that want to climb Everest to base camp. And then the product and acquisition and activation and all that sort of stuff that's happening in the product is like what a bunch of different people or Sherpas are doing. And my job as a salesperson in this motion is to really assist someone to the top, where the top is a decision. It's not necessarily the yes, I want to buy. It's do you want to buy or do you not want to buy? And there's a lot less friction in that. And so for me, I felt the role was much different than just pure like quota carrying sales. It was really a product expert, someone who knew the route, knew all the problems, and could Sherpa someone essentially through the decision making process so that they could get to a point where hey, they wanted to buy or no, they didn't, and then you just move on and you get your next traveler up the mountain. And that felt like a lot of what the role was.
And that really aligns, I think, with a lot of the stuff that I've been hearing over the last 2 or 3 years, right? Where it's like the role of the salesperson is going to shift, right? When you're putting the product in the hands of the user to make a decision one way or the other. And even when, let's say, they're an existing customer, maybe it's a matter of them adopting new products, being that Sherpa, being that guide, as opposed to someone who's, trying to close them all the time, right? Guiding them, I think, is what I've been hearing a bunch. So like that SDR role is more going to be, from what I hear, and it makes sense, more of a product specialist, right?
Yeah, I think there's been like there's definitely an evolution, right? So I think now in a lot of PLS orgs, you have like tranches of customer facing people. And I think the Sherpa definitely still applies to like what you may consider like an inbound BDR or a product specialist who's like in the product chat or doing a bunch of like 15-minute, 20-minute calls. They might carry quota as a team or something like that to like incentivize asking, selling questions and getting people to a decision point. But I think it's also just as a note, like in these organizations, I think the path is usually to say, okay, now we want to go up market. And so you end up having like in some of those conversations, you might be a Sherpa if, to your point, George, someone is adopting another product. So like product 3 from you, that's much more of a Sherpa conversation because they already know all about you. But if someone's adopting product 1 and they're like a tranche above kind of product specialist, like, hey, you might have to put on the traditional sales hat because the ACV is higher and it'll feel more like a traditional B2B or enterprise style sale.
One thing to add there, George, if I may, is in a traditional
Please do,
top-down
Fred.
world, in a traditional top-down world, everyone acts as not the Sherpa in that case, but the hunter, the tiger. But when you have a lead, 100% chance if the lead is qualified that the sales rep will nurture that lead. In a PLG world, in a Sherpa world, it's people are getting to your base camp and you don't necessarily pick everyone to help through the journey, right? Some of your leads will convert by themselves. They don't want to talk to sales. So it's not just changing the relationship between sales and lead, but also who do you focus on and who do you let get to success by themselves? I think that's one, and we can get into the nitty gritty of like, how do you figure out who to engage, who to not engage? But I think that's one major distinction.
Yeah, well, why don't we dig into that? How do you determine when to engage and not to engage?
I can start. I would say when to engage. There's two parts. There's two parts. First is there's the traditional scoring of who's a product qualified lead or product qualified account, which to me is a combination of three things. Product usage. Have they used the product enough to indicate that they're getting value from your product? Second is, are they showing hand raisers in their product usage? So traditional, like request a demo, try premium features that are not necessarily threshold in product usage, but are more like, hey, I'm looking for help, or I'm looking for a Sherpa or a sales rep. And the third is ICP fit. So do they fit the criteria to be worthwhile for a sales conversation? The side of that coin is who to not engage, because some product qualified accounts or product qualified leads will convert by themselves. They don't need a sales rep, or maybe the revenue potential is not there for a rep to justify spending time with them. And I think there what I what I like as a way to approach whether or not to engage is, can the sales rep, can a human ad speed up the prospect's success or avoid a roadblock that they're not aware of? Not necessarily like, hey, you're qualified, I want to close you, but rather, if I engage, can I show you a new use case that you're not aware of? Can I show you a way to get to success faster? Or is there a roadblock that you're not aware of that you're going to hit a wall and it's going to increase your cost, for example? General. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that seems to cover like 80% of the surface area. I think when I talk to folks who are thinking about this model, you tend to get a lot of some of the things that you had in here, Fred, which feel like inside out. So we talk about this a lot at HubSpot. Like we want to be building outside in, like from the customer's perspective and matching versus like what we need. And inevitably in this motion, you're going to have to look at segmentation and say like, well, clearly I don't want a sales rep talking to this customer because their total spend capacity is so low that the economics just don't work, right? You have to have that. But then as you move up, I think it's a lot about like what you said, Fred, which is super interesting. And I think interesting for earlier product companies. So like, if you're early in the product life cycle, like the product might not be able to support getting to value super quickly. And the UI or UX might not be perfect. And I mean, frankly, it will never be perfect. So like it probably isn't great in the early days. So I think when you mentioned like the roadblocks and things that a rep or Sherpa can jump in and help with, it's like, okay, actually just like answering all these really tactical questions and just guiding someone where where it's basically making up for a product gap with your ICP, with the section of customers that it actually makes sense to talk to.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the narrative. We talk about the sales narrative from a usage perspective. How do you start to determine, David, like how to craft that?
Yeah, I think there's a few. So I saw this question and I really liked it. I think there's a few pieces. And like, I think back to when I was selling HubSpot CRM and I could look at just the data, like how someone was using HubSpot and their website. And I could tell you almost everything about who the person was, what their problems were. And I think that was really just about me also using the product. So we were in a really unique circumstance, which I would suggest like any salesperson out there, if you're a salesperson, like you want to sell something that you also use. And we have the benefit of selling the CRM. And then also we were salespeople using sales tools to sell salespeople sales tools. It was like kind of perfect. And so I could look at it and I could be like, okay, I see that they're doing these couple of things. I know because we've already gone through all these problems. And I know based on the type of business, here's the next thing that they're going to run into and be interested about. And that's how I would basically position a lot of my outreach. Now, we gave people the ability to book with me as a rep if they were kind of in that gets human bucket. But if people weren't booking and I knew I needed to reach out to them, I would just be like, hey, I know what's going to happen next. And here's what you should look out for. Do you want to hop on the phone for 10 minutes and chat through it? And so it was, again, like very outside in, figuring out what I thought their pains would be. Some of this is like, it does take repetition as a kind of an org to understand this and to build that use case library. And then as a salesperson, just being on the phone all the time with these people, but thinking about the next step. Like, okay, what happens after they have done these things? What do I typically see happen next? And when I see people who have done these things, how do they think about their world and how have I historically been able to help them and get to a decision point?
Got it. Fred, if you think about our pitch, right, a lot of the time we're focused on pain points. Any tips or advice around pitching around use cases as opposed to like pain or problem?
Yeah, I think that's very important because people are in your product, so they get the pain that they have. They're currently using your product to solve that pain. So I see the sales rep's job as not convincing you that you have that pain and selling you on a solution, rather like, hey, you're already solving it to some extent. I have found a new way to use the product or a new feature. And I would kind of add a different angle to what David just said, which is, I am a user of a sales tool. I'm trying to sell you a sales tool. I understand the pains that you're going to face. Well, you can also take an ROI approach to, maybe you don't have any pains. Maybe you're doing super well in the product. You're getting success. but the rep, being a specialist of the product, can look at how an account has been using the product and identify, okay, they're getting X amount of value with these features, but if they use our automation tool or this set of features on our Business Plus plan, well, I think that instead of saving, for example, 5 hours a week, they can save 15. So you build a case with ROI, and then in an ideal world, you have data or customer case studies to back that up. But that would be a different angle, which is you're getting success, no problem. You don't intend to have a sales rep reach out to you, but I found a way for you to get even more value. So I'm going to reach out saying, hey, saw you're getting X amount of value, reference a product usage, but I found a new way. And like our customer Netflix, for example, has been leveraging that and they've been getting awesome results. Is it worth a chat? That's super effective.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm totally aligned with you on that. It's like, I have a lot to say, but I think we should maybe go on to the next thing, because as Fred knows, I can talk.
Well, we can always do more episodes. I want to respect your schedules because I know it's the middle of the day here on a Wednesday, and you're both pretty busy. David, let's talk a little bit about optimizing deals for long-term revenue growth. You mentioned the decision tree once you're on a call. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think like early on, as the Sherpa's role is you're trying to understand like how much time should I be investing with this person, and what is the utility of me doing that, both for myself in the business, but also for that prospect or user. And if you uncover really early that, hey, there's like not much here, this is a super simple use case, I think you need to be doing a very, very quick call. I think it needs to be cool. Like, you're using it. What questions do you have that I can answer? Like, what do you need from me? And I think if the answer is actually like, oh, well, like I have this big team, we have these big initiatives coming up, this is a priority, in your head, you have to do that calculation of like, okay, cool. Like, this is a bigger opportunity, which means they are going to need likely more handholding through this, especially as you're kind of moving up, just because the buying processes are so much different. And then how am I going to be able to position myself to help? So it's not just I'm the product expert and I can help, but it's like, cool. Oh yeah, the legal stuff, got it. I can do that. I can do that with you. Like, oh, you need like custom pricing sort of thing. I can work with the finance team to get that for you as well. So like, let's try to figure out how we can make this possible for you.
Fred, anything you want to add there?
Well, yes, but before that, David, I think it would be valuable for you to explain how you adjusted compensation so that reps work deals that are optimized for long-term revenue.
Yeah, we adopted in the early days, like what we called like a seed and grow strategy, which means we paid kind of like this base rate on the initial. So our model for the CRM was seat based. So we paid an initial rate that was kind of like, we call it like 100% of what you should get on the initial seats. But then for upgraded users over time, we paid like 1.2x. And so the idea was that if there is a big customer here, for sure, like capture it up front. I think that's okay. You still have a quota to hit. But if they need more time to evaluate, or they need a paid pilot, or they need some different evaluation process, let's just try to get one or two people in the door, because we believe in the product and we believe in the ability for them to get value quickly, and that they will organically add users over time. And then we can kind of shorten the sales cycle up front, right? So if we go from saying like, okay, this is like a 5-seat deal versus a 40 or 50 or 100-seat deal, if it's a 100-seat deal and we can capture 4 or 5 up front, get them used to it, make it quick and easy for them, and they kind of organically add over time, it's better for both, I think. And I think especially these days, so back then it was kind of like everyone had money, abundance of everything, like, you could buy whatever you wanted. I think this is even more important now, where it gives you an ability to actually, to Fred's point, like prove ROI early with a small group.
Yeah.
And you're kind of betting on your company and your product, which like hopefully you work somewhere where you want to bet on your company and your product. And then that process takes care of itself. And then the rep or the Sherpa reaps the reward of giving the customer or prospect the best roadmap for buying and evaluating that has the lowest amount of friction.
I would add another angle to that, which is often overlooked, but for go-to-market leadership, it's adjusting the goals and OKRs of other functions that support sales. I was talking to the BD team at Grammarly, and one of the things they do in their enterprise expansion playbook, which is the next playbook I'm releasing, shout out. But one of the things that they do to nurture enterprise deals that have bottom up adoption, but that reps will go top down at the
Yeah.
same time, is they activate ABM campaigns from marketing on those accounts that qualify. But for marketing to spend any time doing that, they need incentives and they need OKR changes. So that's one caveat or new angle that I would add here is PLG in general is cross functional. Every team needs to be. It's not like marketing does its job. They sign up and that's it. No, there's probably some more marketing work to be done if they qualify for an upsell, expansion, etc.
Yeah, this whole thing is really hard when you don't have kind of general organizational buy-in from all teams, right? Like you could pull this thread even more, which is like, okay, the product team too. Like, will they allow someone to put a button in the product? And we had some of this really early days of HubSpot CRM where like we had a growth team, but they weren't allowed to touch the product. And so luckily at that time there was a bunch of green space for like listicles and like all of this sort of content that no one was really doing. And so we were able to drive a ton of usage. But as soon as we were able to put a growth team in the product with metrics and accountability to a number, like the whole world changed. And so I think a lot of companies now are like, you know, kind of starting with PLG. And so you already have this in your DNA, but it's very hard to like go backwards, which is what we actually did.
Real quick, David, you mentioned, the power of uncovering or finding underutilized use cases. Any specific points here before we wrap up the episode?
I wish I had something like super insightful here, but it's the same advice I give to most customer facing people, which is like be curious. Which is like Ted Lasso plug, big Ted Lasso fan. But that's it. Like I think in these situations, you have to be genuinely curious about someone's role, but also someone's role in the business and what their business does. I think as a customer facing person, you have a unique opportunity to like learn about a ton of different businesses in a ton of different industries. And I think you have to obviously like and be interested in that. But I know like when I hire folks, that's something I look for, right? Because when you're curious, you uncover kind of the space and you'll start to hear a lot more use cases. And if you're kind of just focused on this is a sale, this is a prospect, you don't get that. And then it lends itself to just a much easier conversation too. Like, can you get interested in a prospect? And like, would you rather as a prospect spend 30 or 60 minutes with a sales rep and like jam out on your business problems and like eventually you decide maybe you want software, or would you like want to get asked a templated discovery? You know, like it is just
True.
a better way to sell and to be sold to, when there's like value. So that's kind of the general advice. It's hard to be like, this is exactly how you do it or how this manifests. I think it just has to happen at the individual level with literally just like, cool, what do you think they got going on in their
Yeah,
world? And what do you think they really hate about their job? And
that
just being like
curiosity.
curious about everyone that you talk to in that capacity.
Awesome. Fred, as we wrap up here, any final thoughts around that particular point?
Well, you can leverage if you have a tool that gives you a view into how people are using your product. That's always useful. And I totally agree with David. Basic curiosity, and then you match the research of your curiosity with how have they been leveraging the product, and you'll see angles. And also looking at how your past successful customers have been using your product. What features did they leverage at what point? And combining the two will give you an answer. It doesn't need to be more complex than that.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to chat, and for everyone tuning in. Thanks so much. I'll go ahead and post the link to the LinkedIn post, and there's a wonderful graphic, that or slideshow, I should say, that walks through this model. David, Fred, thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.
Pleasure, man. See ya.
Okay, thanks, guys.